What's up, DWA fam? This is Asia, here to remind you that if you like this podcast, go ahead and hit subscribe, give us a rating or leave a review. We appreciate y'all listening and hope you enjoy the episode.
Yo. How we doing?
We are back. Another week.
How are you?
Every week we surprise ourselves that we're still here.
Facts.
And still going strong. Yeah. So I'm just proud of us.
Yeah, we appreciate you all.
For continuing to show up and do this. And we've come a long way, so go us. Anyways.
We got a dope topic.
Yeah, we have a really good episode, so we're not even going to do the fluff like we normally do. We're going to get right into it.
We're not going to bore you.
We're not going to bore you. We have
a very important topic.
Very important topic and a very important and amazing guest to introduce to you all. Her name is Aymie. She's amazing. She's going to tell you more about herself. But Aymie and I met through our businesses, and we both do network marketing. And that's one of the reasons I love what I do. Jared knows because I never stop talking about it. But
you meet a lot of great people.
I've met so many amazing people, and
that's
it's
just me looking from the outside in.
That's one of the things I'm grateful for is how many amazing people I've met and being able to do things like this with those people. So, therefore,
making connections, learning stories, learning different experiences.
Exactly.
It's what's needed in life.
And today's topic is very, it's just going to be so good. Aymie is actually sharing her story with us for the first time. I believe, which she will confirm for us, but I believe it's the first time she's sharing her story ever. So we hope that you all are excited to hear from her and sort of hear her experience specifically with domestic violence, but also with just having to start over as an adult at some point. And I feel like even if you don't have a specific experience with domestic violence, at some point, as we're all hitting our late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s, whatever your age is, we've had to sort of think of this decision of should I start this new thing? Should I start my life over? Yeah. Should I leave this person? Should I stay with this person? All the things that surround adulting. And so I think Aymie's story is really going to just shed some light onto, first of all, just the issue of domestic violence in general, but also how she was able to overcome that and
accept change,
become the successful woman that she is today. So anywho, we hope that was a good intro, Aymie, but we're so excited to have you here, and I'm just so grateful you are on the podcast today.
I'm excited to be here, and I can confirm this is the first time that I've shared any of this with anybody except for, a select few in my very close circle.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
well,
it's an important topic.
Thank you. It's so important. So before you get into the meat of everything, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, where you grew up. Give us a little bit about your background and what you do and all that good stuff.
So I am from a little island called Vancouver Island. It's in British Columbia, Canada. I have spent, this is where I was born. I've spent lots of my life here. And then as an adult, I spent most of my time over on the mainland of Vancouver. I love to travel, and it's something that I have to laugh about, but I am literally the girl in the meme that's girls go to school for however long to learn about psychology and then get manipulated by a man. That's
stop.
me,
Okay,
well, psychology.
Quick question before you get into that. How many people live on this island? What is that? What is that like? I don't
even know what the population is.
But is it small? We don't.
It's actually a big island.
Oh, okay. This is ignorant.
That's over on the West Coast, right?
Yeah, it is. I'm looking up.
We're just normal, ignorant Americans that don't know anything about things outside.
870,000.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah,
I thought it was going to be smaller.
It's not a little tiny island, but
okay, all right.
It's an island nonetheless.
That makes more sense. Yeah. Okay, well, start us wherever you feel like is a good point to sort of jump into your life story, and then take us on your journey, if you don't mind.
So, one of the things, I do a lot of therapy. I do a lot of self-reflection. I've had to with this. And so one of the things that I think is important to note about this is that my story doesn't actually begin with this one relationship. It begins with my childhood, right? There's, particular things that can go on in a childhood that will make you more susceptible to things like domestic violence, certain relationships with your parents. So that's kind of where my story starts, and that I lived in a chaotic home. I lived in a home where my, the male figure in my life did not show me actual love, So then I grew up and I didn't fully encompass that. I knew these things went on, right? Like I said, I studied psychology. I, became a wellness practitioner. I seemed like I had it all together. And so I think because of that, I was maybe the perfect candidate to get involved with somebody that was essentially like pathological. I'm empathetic, I'm kind, I want to see the best in everybody. So, to kind of fast forward a little bit, and I'll get into the childhood stuff. In 2013, I became involved with a man, and I thought that it was like a whirlwind romance. Okay.
How old were you at the time, if you don't mind me asking?
So I'm 30 now. What's the math on that? What, 23?
Okay. Yeah. So a child.
A child, essentially, right? But at the time,
into the world,
you thought you knew. Yeah. Of
course I knew. And yeah, it was like this whirlwind, right? So what I now know is that he is a narcissist. Okay, I literally could teach a course on narcissism now. So what a narcissist does is they literally mirror all of the good things about you back to you. So this sounds bizarre and this sounds narcissistic, but I literally fell in love with somebody that seemed just like me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I've never heard it.
Yeah, never heard it put like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, we've all heard of like narcissists, and we toss the term around like somebody that's like really full of themselves.
Yeah, that's
like,
what I thought it was.
Yeah.
Which is, that's just the very, very tip of the iceberg, and there's actually different kinds of narcissists and whatnot. But what happens in a narcissistic relationship is that period of time that I thought was a whirlwind romance is called love bombing. And so everything moves really, really quickly. And so, within a month, he told me he loved me. Within 3 months, he'd moved me into his place. Within 5 months, he had literally taken over all of my finances. Everything was swapped over. Like, I didn't own my own vehicle anymore. Like, literally. And it just all was under the guise of being taken care of, which, of course, I did not receive as a child. So it's just packaged up, so nicely. And so, I mean, that's one of the things, to take into consideration, like as adults that are trying to navigate our way through the world and hopefully not end up in these situations, is that if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Right.
Yeah. And let me ask, just because I have a family member, a really close cousin who's like a sister to me, who was in an abusive relationship for like 7 years, like a long time. So I experienced that just from the outside looking in on her relationship. And so as a family member, right, like of her who was going through that, I wanted to ask you, during that time when it was like a whirlwind, was your friends or family like giving you any feedback about that? Were you like ignoring the haters and just like in love? Like, what did that look like from a family dynamic standpoint?
And to add to that, sorry, before you answer, did he try to separate you from your family and your friends?
It was like a little bit of both. So my mom thought he was a psychopath right from day one.
Moms always
Mother's
know.
Intuition, yeah.
And always know. They always know.
Sheesh.
Yeah, so she was not having it, okay? But if she didn't accept him, then she just would see less of me, right? So, she did whatever she needed to do to keep me around. My sisters, I have 2 younger sisters, they basically got love bombed right along with me. So he just took them in under his wing, a very wealthy man, very successful man, so he just you know, he took care of them. And that to me was huge. But then, you know, like Jared just said, I did have other people. So my mom, I don't think he ever attempted to separate me from my mom because I think he knew that it wouldn't work. But I did have other friends that either had heard things about him or just did not like him, didn't like the vibe. And so, yeah, he definitely created, you know, he never came right out and said, you can't do any of these things. You know, I think he knew that I was a strong enough person that probably wouldn't have flown. That's the thing about narcissistic abuse is like, it's so insidious, but it would just be that I would feel uncomfortable to hang out with these people that didn't like him. You know, I was in my oldest friend's wedding. I was a bridesmaid in her wedding. He was not invited. I basically was a bridesmaid, and then we pretty much stopped being friends right after that because she made it explicitly clear that he was not to attend her wedding.
Wow.
Right.
And I think like the scary thing about that is I feel like at some point I know in our lives personally, in a lot of people's lives, you date someone that maybe your friends don't like.
For sure.
And you don't care.
The guy that
You're
I dated
that,
before him, some people weren't that keen on either. And he was just a normal man.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like how do you take every little thing into consideration?
Okay. Sorry, we are interrupting you so much, but I just want to.
That's how we do, though. We like
I know. I'm sorry. But anyways, go ahead. Continue. So you 6 months, everything like first 6 months to a year was kind of like a whirlwind.
It was a whirlwind, but with a lot of red flags.
Was he older too? Sorry to ask.
He was older.
Okay.
Yeah. Not like that much older. You know, I think so I'm 30 and I think will be 38 in August. So not too much older than me, but it's a big enough age gap. And he seemed, you know, so much older because he had his life together. Right. So, so things kind of just moved along quite quickly. But I mean, looking back now, there was lots of red flags, but I didn't share those red flags.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you know them at the time, or are they like things you figured out after the fact, or both?
Some of them I've just discovered retrospectively. Okay. But a lot of them, like, I definitely saw it, but I didn't want to see it. You know, I had this kind of like savior complex almost that I was going to be able to fix him and change him. You know, I saw it as like all this darkness that he carried around. He'd had a very sort of abusive childhood, and so he had shared that with me, which, you know, just made all of my like angel wings sprout out. And so he would do these things which, like, looking back on it, were absolutely horrible. But I just somehow thought that I literally thought that part of my purpose on this earth was to like pull this man to the light, which you know, is a really naive way of seeing the world. But
I feel like that happens a lot. Like,
exactly,
people think they could change the other person and make them a better person, and that's the goal. But once you're in there, you realize you can't. You
can't.
Found it the hard way.
They will play along, right? You know, he knew how to play the game. He knew how to change just enough so that I felt like I made a difference. And in a lot of ways I did. So with a narcissist, when they're mirroring you, they literally, because they don't have actual personalities of their own. So he, and you know, people that knew him for longer, now that the kind of whole story has come out, they will laugh about some of the stuff that happened. They're like, all of a sudden he became like this cultured, like kind person. And like, they were like, we didn't know him to be that. That was just me. That was my personality that he was borrowing. But I didn't know that. So I was just like,
that is so scary.
It's bizarre. It's a bizarre phenomenon for sure.
Okay, so move us sort of along, because also just to clarify, how long did this relationship last?
Okay, so we were together from 2013 to 2018. We were engaged in under a year. Okay, which is that's another, like, everything moves very quickly, right? We got engaged and he wanted us to get married 3 days later. He was like calling places.
Was that a red flag for you?
Married. Well, that's the thing, is something in my gut always prevented us from getting married, right? We planned a wedding. We went to Thailand and looked at wedding venues, but I never would cross that. There was always something in my gut that was like, nah, you're not signing a piece of paper.
But was it just, I'm like, my mind is like going in a million circles. That feeling that you had, right? Was it the gut feeling saying like, this is like a no for me in terms of marriage? Or was it like, it's just too soon? Like I could see marriage, but just like not this quickly.
There's a lot of like cognitive dissonance that goes on with narcissistic abuse because it's so like under the surface. So
can you explain what cognitive dissonance is?
So
just for people who
cognitive
don't know.
dissonance is essentially when your reality is completely different from what is actually occurring, right? So my understanding of the relationship was not actually what was happening. Got it. Like at all, really. And then when you couple that with the fact that he literally lied through his teeth about everything all the time, but there was so much of it that I didn't know. He was so convincing. So I couldn't tell you for sure if it was that I didn't see us getting married, because I feel like part of me did, but it was like I was waiting for this like magical change to happen, for him to fully, like, for these red flags to stop popping up, for the shitty stuff to stop happening. But so I was like waiting for that, but like in my heart of hearts, did I know that was probably never going to happen? Maybe not. But it's like your subconscious and your conscious mind, like they battle all the time. So consciously, I knew like, this is wrong. It's not supposed to be like this. You should leave. But my subconscious was so trauma bonded to him. They say that it's similar to like Stockholm syndrome, essentially. Yeah. So
wow, Aymie.
He was like my pain and my medicine. Like to this day, when stuff happens, my subconscious wants him first.
Wow. So in your relationship, when did you, I guess, realize that you needed to get out of it? Or was that jumping too quickly?
The embarrassing part. I probably realized within the first little bit. But again, like that sort of,
like within the first year, you mean? Within the first year?
Within the first couple months, honestly.
Oh, wow.
But I stuck around. So I was with him until 2018. And then this sort of big climactic thing occurred. I was like publicly humiliated. I take off to Indonesia. I'm supposed to be there for a month, do my like eat, pray, love journey. I stayed for 9 months. He begged me every single day for 9 months to try again. He wrote me letter after letter. He attended therapy. He did all of the things I'd always asked him to do. And so when I came back, I literally felt like, well, he's not gotten out of my head. I haven't been able to move on. So maybe this is just, maybe my lesson here is forgiveness.
Like it's meant to be.
Yeah. Like that's, and again, I know that it sounds naive, but it was like, I gave it another go. And so I came home in, it was literally 2 years ago this month. And then, so with narcissistic abuse, if you abandon a narcissist, it's called discarding. If you discard a narcissist, it is the biggest wound that they can suffer to their ego. It's the most hurtful thing you can do to them.
Like, how dare you?
Exactly. Because they basically operate from like the mindset of like a 7-year-old child, right? So he views me as his property, and then I abandon ship. So even though I tried again with him, because I had all these, I did a lot of healing when I was away. I had all these boundaries and all this like inner strength. So I didn't come back the same person that I was when I left. And so they say that with narcissistic abuse, the second time around, it's going to be like the exact same stuff will happen, but way worse, which is exactly what happened. So I came home in April. By September, it was like heinous.
Like physical, or
so can you just give us, if you're comfortable with that, like you said, if you go a second time, the same things will happen, but like worse. So what sort of things were happening, whether physical or emotional or whatever? And I also just want to like call out that like literally nothing that you've said so far sounds naive in anyway. Like, it just like
It's a real
hearing
thing.
this.
Yeah.
Hearing this just confirms what I already thought of. Like, this could literally happen to anybody in the freaking world. And it's like wild to understand like the steps of how this happens. But anyways, that's a sidetrack. In the first time, like the first 5 years pre-Indonesia, like what things were happening, whether physically or emotionally, that were then exacerbated the second time?
So the biggest thing that occurred in our relationship was like sort of mental and emotional abuse, mostly in the form of lying and cheating. Okay. There was also a fair bit of financial abuse. There was physical abuse, but it like doesn't even register on my Richter scale because it was like it honestly felt the least damaging of everything that I endured.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Being like a man, sorry to cut you off, being like a man, I feel like, and I've seen abuse in my family, domestic violence, things like that. I go to like the physical being the worst. So it's crazy to hear that even though you went through the physical, like that wasn't even the worst part.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think like that's one of the things, like I can gaslight myself and tell myself that what I went through was not that bad. It's only been probably in the past like 6 or 8 months that I've even been able to say I was in an abusive relationship. Because to me, being abused, you know, I like I said, I grew up in a very chaotic home. To me, being abused is, primarily physical violence. But and I think that there's so much that needs to change about that narrative because, like I said, like that literally, that you can process, you know?
Like verbal
for me, it was
and
like for that, there's a beginning, middle, end, and then you process it. The other stuff, it was like day in and day out. It literally eats away at like who you are as a person, you know? When your reality is one thing, when you're experiencing what you think is like a loving relationship, and the reality is that your partner literally has other girlfriends in other cities when they are, I don't know what words we're allowed to say on this podcast.
We fully curse.
They are fucking one of your oldest friends in your kitchen while you're asleep.
Oh, no, Aymie, you're going to have to rewind.
That's wild.
You know?
Aymie. What? Can you please back that up and say that one more time? He had multiple other partners, and one of those partners, like not just partners, like people he's fucking. We're talking about like other people who thought they were in a relationship with him, right?
I have no idea if she thought she was in a relationship with him. I have no idea what she thought, because when I found out after the fact, years after the fact, I never spoke to her again.
This is your friend.
This is your roommate?
What you call a friend?
He was my he was my friend that I invited to come and stay with us, because why not? He would go to where she lived and stay with her. I never thought anything of it. Like, why wouldn't my fiance be able to stay with one of my oldest friends? Why not?
That's crazy.
Like it didn't, you know, I love them both. Like, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense, because like, I'm so glad you're saying that, because this brings up another point in my head that I feel like I was reading on the internet the other day, or something on Instagram. Who knows? Instagram is wild. But like this idea of like male and females being like good friends. Like Jared and I are really, really good friends. We're both married, and like if Jared was here podcasting and we got drunk podcasting and he wasn't going to drive, he'd sleep on my couch. I'd call his wife Emily and be like, Jared's not going to drive because we accidentally got wasted, but like he'll call you when he wakes up. Do you know what I mean? Like that would not be weird for us because we have healthy relationships. So something like that, what you're saying, I feel like a lot of people would be like, well, why would you even let him stay with another female? But like, to me, that's also normal.
Yeah, that would be a question.
They would FaceTime me. They would FaceTime me. And like, we would all chat. Like we were friends.
Crazy.
That's what I mean. So some of like it's tricky, because some of the lessons that you're supposed to learn from this, you know, I've had to be really careful that the lesson that I take from this isn't to just trust no one, right? Like that's what your body wants to do initially.
That I would do, probably.
Yes.
Yeah. Right? Which that won't serve me at all.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
It'll hurt you more, probably.
But yeah, like, how do you trust a girlfriend? How do you trust your partner? Like, it's wild.
Well, and also, how do you like trust yourself again too?
And that's the other thing is like, you know, like I said, I can gaslight myself about this whole thing worse than anybody else ever could. So yeah, as far as like the types of abuse, it was mostly psychological, and emotional. You know, he was a distant person. And so it was like, you know, just this sort of constant, like, I just felt like I was on a hamster wheel. Like, I could just never be good enough. I was never seemingly like enough. And then the financial abuse was pretty severe as well. Just because, you know, it was like, you know, I'd been working since I was 12 years old, right? Like, I'd had a job, and then it's like, cut back on your hours, cut back on this, cut back on that. You know, I had
so he can control
credit cards, and I had access to everything. I never wanted for anything. Like, we lived a very privileged life. But then, you know, after things got really bad, it was like, so now here I am. I thought that we were carrying on a life together, and now here I am with essentially nothing. I can remember the day that he did something else horrendous, just like lied. And I was traveling, and he was on the phone with me, like telling me like, you're such a fucking idiot, like blah, 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 like screaming at me. And I said to him, I was like, how can you do this? Like, how can you do this? He said, I'm the one with the money, Aymie. I can do whatever I want.
What?
He would try to hold that over your head.
I don't even understand that.
So I like can't, Aymie, I have a choice.
To make you feel just as small as possible and make you feel that you actually need him to survive.
So when you were in Indonesia doing your Eat, Pray, Love, and you broke up and you were only supposed to go for a month, you stayed for 9 months, and was that because you weren't ready to go back and like face that decision? Also, sidebar to that is because the financial abuse was so severe at that time, I think. How did that affect like what you were doing on your trip? Like, was that a part of that? Was that kind of like what was keeping him holding on? Because like I was just trying to figure out that dynamic, and just the fact that you were in Indonesia for nine months. That's like a long time to be halfway across the world.
So while I was in Indonesia, essentially that whole time, so, you know, I could talk about the cycles of abuse, like in a narcissistic relationship. It just sort of goes from one thing to the next, and they're kind of like loop back on themselves. So what a narcissist does is at first they love bomb you, or they idealize you. They put you up on this pedestal that you're never allowed to come off of, right? You know, you have to withhold whatever it is that they've created in their mind of you. And then at some point, sort of the red flags or the abuse will come in, and that's called devaluation. So a lot of narcissists devalue you like verbally. They will say nasty things to you. In our relationship up until September of 2019, he was not like that at all. 2019 to today, he's horrendous. but that was something that I experienced. Pardon?
You still talk to him? You still?
Very rarely. So our finances are still not separated because he refuses to separate them. So there is the odd conversation. Last week, he needed to message me because he didn't know my email address.
That seems like
same
a lie.
Email address I've had for 7 years. Yeah, but he didn't know it. So he also is renting the parking space beside my best friend's car in my best friend's building where he does not live.
Okay, hold on.
Wow.
We're going to unpack that. But before we unpack that, because like I want to get us back to where we're in Indonesia. Yeah. It's been 9 months. You come home, and literally like 15 minutes ago before we got off track, you mentioned that once you got home and gave the relationship another go, that's when things really like popped the fuck off. So like, what did that look like for you?
So that whole time I was in Indonesia, he was love bombing me essentially, right?
Mhm.
He was making it seem all sunshine and rainbows. And because I was so far removed, I was able to just kind of like live my life and you know, I felt fine about it, which like I said, I did a lot of work, but I clearly bypassed like some of the really deep stuff. So yeah, I came home. Like I said, I had all these boundaries, you know, he was like, wanted me to move in with him right away. I was like, no, like whatever. So that was I got home end of April, and by
29.
July,
What
he
year is
had
this?
another girl. This was 2019.
Okay. So we're not at September 19 yet. Okay, so you got back in April. By July, he was dating someone else?
Evidently, because they celebrated their 1 year anniversary in the summer, and I was like, oh, neat. So Nations in 2019.
September, yeah.
I was on stage in a sparkly dress receiving all of these amazing awards for all of this hard work that I had done. I remember absolutely none of it. I literally have a black hole for that whole, I have no idea. I know that I walked up on stage and received those awards because there are videos, but I had just received a message with a photo of a girl saying, this is who Ryan fucks when you're out of town. They're in Mexico together right now.
Right before you went on stage?
It was the night before. I received it the night before.
For reference, Nations is like our conference, our yearly,
like our big work
our yearly
conference
conference.
thing.
Yeah. Holy shit.
So I called him because I'm like, there's no way that this
is happening.
Like, there's no, you know, you wouldn't put all this effort in for so long. There's no way. So I'm calling him. He answers the phone absolutely out of his mind. So the other part of this that I did not fully grasp is that while I was in Indonesia, he developed a drug problem. And so I wasn't aware of it. I knew it was something that he was dabbling in. And then I think that kind of helped to kick things into kind of high gear. So yeah, he basically was already in another relationship with somebody else. So with a narcissist, what they call that is supply. They call it new supply. Ugh. And it's basically,
Feed the ego?
It's like they're literally just
it's like gross. Ugh.
Yeah. So she gave him this supply. So now he can discard me. He doesn't need me to make him feel worthy anymore. So it was insane. It was insane.
Sounds like addiction.
And then I started doing the math. So a couple weeks prior, he had been like going away. And so I was like, I'll clean up his place. So I'm cleaning up his place and I message him and I'm like, who's been here with all this black hair? Like, why is there? Because there was somebody else there whenever I wasn't there. Like, but he lied through his teeth. He was like, some so-and-so's friend, such and such, his cousin, blah, blah. Like, it was like, yeah.
Oh,
crazy.
OMG. Okay, so what were we... I'm sorry. We talked about September... so September 2019, that was Nations. That was the big, like... Is that what you're referring to when you say, like, big public humiliation?
The public humiliation was the one that was another one. Like, that's when it got really, really bad. And that's when he just started being, like, utterly horrendous. You know, I was to be... Our friends were getting married in November. I was a bridesmaid. Like, we literally had a place booked together. Like, I had nowhere else to stay. The resort was booked out. I'm meant to stay with him. He takes her.
Wow.
My friend had to call him and be like, if you don't send that girl home, you cannot come to the wedding. Like, so I had to go and just intermix with this sociopath.
Wow.
Yeah, like, but no, the public humiliation in 2018, you know, he traveled for work. Like, you know, like I said, I realized that there was other girls, but they were usually elsewhere. This girl was down the road. He was paying her rent. And she just sort of went public about it with a group of girls. I guess she got drunk and she was just like, I know he'll never leave Aymie, but I'm fine being the side bitch. Those were her words. And yeah, he'd been paying her rent and yeah. So that was when I left for Indonesia, and then this other person was, like a year-ish later.
So I wanted to ask you, like, just I guess the thought of like starting over and ending that relationship. But are y'all still engaged or?
No. So I stopped wearing my ring, like when that happened back in 2018. So yeah, like I have the ring now.
So
I don't know what to do with it.
Once that happened, like what were some of your feelings with, I guess, trying to start over and just trying to make new relationships with people after going through that certain abuse?
I at first went through, I think, what's natural, like all men are shit, and and then I changed that narrative, and I was like, the men that I'm attracted to are going to be shit. And so yeah, like I literally dove into therapy. I talked to a therapist every Tuesday for an hour for an entire year. And because the idea of starting over, like I literally felt like the past 6 years of my life were a facade. So it didn't even feel like I was starting over. Like it literally felt like I backtracked. Like I was like, who am I? Can I be trusted to make choices about my life? Like where do I go from here? How do I formulate a life? How do I possibly formulate a new relationship? With narcissism, it's like, I have friends that saw it for what it was, either before, during, or after. But I have other friends that are, still kind of under his magical spell and, think that he just, he made a mistake, or, Aymie, you were too guarded. You wouldn't let him back in. So he.
Who the fuck says that?
Actually, so you saying that, I was going to ask you.
Who the fuck says that?
I was going to ask you before you even said that, like, do you ever look at yourself and give yourself blame? But it sounds like that has to be the case with even your friends or people who are close to you who are trying to put the blame on you.
One of the things, and I speak mostly about narcissistic abuse because that's primarily what I experience. But I think that that's probably true for most abuse. If you think to, and they will say it to you. He would say, if you didn't work, I wouldn't have to cheat on you. If you didn't work so much, I wouldn't have to. If you were home more, I wouldn't have to. If you gave me more attention, I wouldn't seek it elsewhere. If you let me in, I wouldn't have to do X, Y, Z. If you would just trust me more, I wouldn't have to lie. Like whatever, they will tell it to you. So of course, in my mind, I'm like, you ruminate over your things and you think, okay, for a while, I was like, I made the biggest mistake. If I had just come back from Bali and just moved in with him and just let him in, it was just loving and dropped all my guards, and this wouldn't have happened. But like, that's not true.
Right.
It would have.
Right.
Yeah, you weren't going to change him.
I just want to say,
exactly.
If any one of those people who say that happens to listen to this episode, I want to just openly say y'all are dumb as shit. And that's just my personal opinion.
You can say, you can go as bad as you want.
I know.
You don't know.
I usually don't want to like verbally attack people like that, but I'm feeling like very like protective and defensive. The other thing I was gonna say too is when I was, helping my cousin through her situation, and her situation was primarily physical, like a lot of physical abuse, a lot of threatening to kill, attempts to kill, like would pull up the emergency brake on the highway type of shit. And there was a point in our relationship, and we are so close. Like there was a point in our relationship where I could see her trying to push me away, not because he was making her do that, so to speak, but I think there was just so much shame, unfortunately. And
on her end? Yes.
Yeah. And every time I would say, like, this isn't you, like, I know this isn't you. And
like she felt you would judge her for staying.
And at the time, I was actually in school for my master's in social work. So I was like learning about abusive relationships and like also watching her go through that. And one day she texted me and was like, I don't need you. Your opinions like aren't for me. Like you're just trying to like send messages from like my mom and like try to control me. And I texted her back, and I'm just saying this as like an example of like what a supportive friend could do in the situation as opposed to whatever these people are doing for you. But like I messaged her back and I was like, you know, you can say whatever you want to me. Nothing that you say to me is going to hurt my feelings because I know this isn't you. And when this is over and you have come out on the other side of this and are able to see that and realize that, like, I'm still going to be right here. I don't care if you don't text me for 6 months. If you pick up the phone, like, I will show the fuck up. And that's what I was learning in school. Like, sometimes you can't tell this person I like hate using the word victim, although it applies because I feel like, especially on the other side, you're like a survivor, but in the moment you're a victim of this. And it's like, you can't always get through to the victim because there's so much abuse. And so like for you as a support system of that person is sometimes they really do have to go through that season and realize for themselves. And like the most important thing I feel like is just being there on the other side as if like whatever they went through has not changed your relationship. And so I say all that to say, like, I hope, and you can speak to this, but your family and other people in your life who were that for you when you were able to come out on the other side. And I'm wondering if you can speak to a little bit about like, if it was important for you to have those people, how it helped, and
the support system. Yeah,
how other people, if they know somebody in a situation that's dangerous or emotionally abusive, can be a support system if that person isn't necessarily ready to move on from that situation.
Yeah, for sure. I think, you used the word shame when you first started talking. And there is so much shame. Like, there's so much shame that goes on. Like, even me speaking about this now, I'm ashamed of like what I put my own self through. But shame doesn't serve anybody anything. Like, it's such a low vibration emotion. And it's like, but what do you do with that? And so, when there's people around you and like, I don't know if your cousin was the same, but like I was quiet about so much of went on. Like even my best friend who, she's withstood abuse of her own in her previous relationship, but there's still stuff that I will mention to her and she's like, you never told me that because you just leave it out, because if you're going to talk about it, then you have to take an actual look at it.
Right.
So the one side of it is that even if you witness what's going on, you could draw attention to it, but at the end of the day, people are going to probably just go through it, regardless of what you have to say. And if somebody shares with you, the worst thing that you can do is, create any sort of space where they don't feel safe to share with you again, Yeah. Because most of the time, if somebody shares with you what's going on in an abusive relationship, they're probably going to go back and you're probably going to hear about it again. I feel terrible for some of the people in my life. They had to hear the same stuff for like months and months and months. But you just have to like process it. And it's the same as like the starting over. It's like you have to have a space in which you're free to do that. And that could be starting over from anything. It doesn't have to be, from an abusive relationship. It's like there has to be a safe space to do that, and like a no judgment zone, because we already feel stupid enough. We're whatever it is that you can think or judge or gaslight us about, like we've already done it to ourselves. We don't need it from an external source.
So for, I guess, other people listening and people who might not have been in abusive relationships, what are some signs or red flags that you think people can see, like the obvious ones that people can see in regards to mental, emotional, physical abuse? And
as a follow-up to that, you talked a little bit about how like your gut was sort of like giving you hints very early on and you did not listen to your gut, but I feel like we all kind of go through that, right? Like any decision that we have to make, like our gut has an initial response. And sometimes we ignore it and ask 20 other people their opinion on it before we make a decision and all that good stuff, right? So how that comes into play too, and any advice that you would give for, similar to Jared's question, listening to your gut and fine-tuning that skill.
Some of the red flags that you can watch for is, like, it literally ties directly into your question, like, what is your body saying? And it's hard because we grow up with this narrative of like butterflies. Like, butterflies is mostly anxiety, and you're not actually supposed to feel that. You know, sure, you can feel a little bit of excitement when you're getting to know somebody, but if you're literally vibrating all the time, it's probably your body rejecting that other person. And it's crazy that I ended up in this situation. Like I said, psych background, holistic nutrition, like I'm all about, you hear me talk, I'm all about like getting in your body. And then this happened. So you have to allow yourself the space to listen to that. If things move really quickly, that actually is a red flag. The whirlwind romance that you see in a movie. And I'm not saying this is a blanket statement. Of course, there are exceptions to every rule, but generally speaking, if somebody tells you that all of their exes are crazy, that's a red flag, right? Like I know the narrative that's been presented to this new girl about me. I know because I heard it from the girl that came prior to me, who I realized, after we'd been dating, there had been an overlap that I didn't know about, right? So that's a red flag. When people are inconsistent, right? And that's a tricky one because I almost feel like all the kind of like dating games that everybody plays is like promotes inconsistency. You don't want to be too there, but if your relationship is like seemingly progressing, but there's like these incongruencies or whatever, that's a red flag. And if somebody flat out lies to you and you know without a shadow of a doubt that it is a lie, like run. Because it's like they do not respect you and they never will again, especially if they realize that you've caught on to the lie and you stick around anyways. And this is not to gaslight me or anybody else, but like we do teach people how to treat us. And you're not responsible for other people's behavior. You're responsible for your own. And it's not easy to leave. And all that little vibrational feeling, butterflies, whatever you want to call it, is usually just your inner child trauma bonding to the other person's inner child. And it's like you shouldn't be feeling on edge all of the time when you're conversing with somebody or with somebody or whatever. That shouldn't be the case. And that listening to your body thing, like it will tell you. And man, mine was screaming, my hair was falling out, my skin went
can you talk more about that? Hair loss, like these are physical signs that you went through.
I had like my hair was literally coming out in chunks. I remember this was when we first started hanging out. His cleaning lady was like, I don't know, whatever this girl is that you're dating, like she should see a doctor. Like she's losing a lot of hair. It's because my body was like, what are you doing?
Wow.
What are you doing? But that chaos was so familiar to me. Like it was just, if I couldn't convince my dad to love me, I'll convince this man to love me and solve all my problems. Right. Like, so yeah, and that's one of the things, I guess, that ties into the starting over as well. And obviously, being in an abusive situation is a further extreme, but whatever it is that you're having to give up, if you're starting over, whether it's by choice or because you've just ended up there, we literally get one life, like as far as we know, and I remember this was probably a year ago. I'm going to pat myself on the back. I have gained about 8 pounds in the last year.
Nice.
That's a feat for me. Okay. I sold all of my pants because I'm like, I will never get that thin again. I was sitting there like, just, I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I'm like ruminating all the time. I'm stressed. My body is constantly vibrating. And I was like, I am going to give myself a disease. and your body cannot withstand. And we create these stories of like passion and love and what it's just toxicity, and the external toxicity will end up creating toxicity within your physical self. Like it's insane, the correlation between the two.
That's wild. That was like that book I read, Burnout, The Stress Cycle. That's what they talk about. It's
sure.
like how if you don't, and this is just like basic stress. This isn't like going through an abusive relationship type of stress. This is like normal life stress, and how if we don't even physically complete our stress cycle with either exercise or a hug, or like they give a bunch of different things that can do it. But it can cause like physical ailments. So I believe you.
For sure.
I believe
For sure.
it. We're obviously clearly just like in shock. I'm like blown away that you have, this is your story and this is your experience. And
I've definitely learned a lot.
I've learned so much about emotional, narcissistic abuse, all these things that you're enlightening us about. I've learned so much about you that I appreciate.
I was very naive coming in because I thought it was going to be mostly about just like physical abuse, but you just totally blew my mind with just everything else you said. And like those other aspects of abuse should be highlighted just as much as the physical.
It was interesting because when Asia sent me the little like write-up, just like some things we might cover, and it said DV, domestic violence, my brain immediately goes, well, you didn't experience domestic violence that much. That is how ingrained, and it's not just in me. Like it might be exacerbated in me because of, the people I've surrounded myself with in my past. Like we all come with our own stories, but it's also ingrained in our society. But like Google it. Mm-hmm. Domestic violence is not just physical. Being thrown around. Like that is if it is happening in your domestic space and it is violence towards any part of you, even if it's just your mind, it is domestic violence. But that was my initial response. Wow. Was it's not, and that's what I mean by the gaslighting, which is huge in narcissistic abuse and abuse period. But we gaslight ourselves and we gaslight other people too. And
we were just talking about this.
If anybody listening can take one thing from this, it's like when you hear someone else's story of their trauma, like do your best to not gaslight them, because it's like you have no idea what actually it's entailed, and we can downplay it so much, and that's the most dangerous. That's the most dangerous thing.
Yeah. Wow, so I know this is crazy. As we like kind of start to wrap up, I want to just ask you one final question. You mentioned that you still go to therapy. You did therapy like every day or every week, for like the first year. And I'm wondering if there's any other tools that you've used in your journey to who you are now and separating yourself from this. I mean, it sounds like you're still working to do that. And so I'm just wondering if you can shed a little light on just that process and what that looks like for you, what has helped. And like, I guess I'm not surprised that you're still having to go through some of this stuff, because the abuse was just so deep and like traumatic. Yeah. But I feel like people don't think about that. Like people think, oh, you left him, like it's fine, everything's better.
Yeah, you can just get over it.
Yeah. And so like, can you just talk a little bit about that process for you?
So yeah, I did a year of talking therapy. The treatment that I'm doing now is called brain spotting, and it is a CPTSD treatment. So we all know what PTSD is, right? Mm-hmm. One thing happens, bang, it's traumatic, it's taken into the body. We all have a really easy time of understanding that. CPTSD is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's what happens when, literally every day, if not every moment, over time, you are traumatized, you are stressed. And the symptoms are the same. So brain spotting is basically a way of rewiring. It's literally quite literally rewires your brain. So there's brain spotting and EMDR. They're similar but different. I won't get too far into it, but if you have experienced abuse or trauma in your life as an adult, as a child, anything, talking therapy is great, but it actually cannot mend those neural pathways in your brain. It actually can't.
Like from a physiological standpoint.
Yeah, just from like a scientific physiological space, the brain spotting and EMDR are the most effective for that. And then, you know, like we talked about, a support system is important and integral. You cannot be around people that will gaslight you at all or downplay at all what you did. The people that do the, you know, the toxic positivity of like, just be happy that you're beautiful and that there's other fish in the sea, and like, I'll throw up. It's not helpful. You have to surround yourself with people that literally believe every word that you say and are going to be there through the ups and downs. And then the biggest tool for me, and I think for anyone in this situation, and it sounds so cheesy and cliche, but like, it's self-love. The reason that you know, if I were to encounter, I freaking hope if I were to encounter a pathological person, a narcissist, an abuser now, I like to believe that it would not ever get past, you know, barely getting to know them. Because you end up in those situations because somehow, somewhere you lack self-love. And I would not have come off to anyone as someone that lacked self-love. You know, like the way that I conduct myself, the way that I move through the world has been similar all the way through this, right? I'm a confident person. I present myself well. I'm intelligent. I'm educated. I'm kind, all this stuff. But there is somewhere deep inside you, a part of yourself that you're rejecting or that thinks is deserving of mistreatment. And so there is no other option than to literally pour love into yourself. That is the only way that you can fill up that void so that you're not susceptible to someone else filling that hole with just more drama.
Nonsense. Is there a level of, I said that was my last question, but obviously, is there a level of like grieving, like the people that you had to cut off that you're like, I can't take any gaslighting, so therefore my boundary is to not converse with you? Is there a level of like grieving those relationships as well in your journey or in your therapy journey, and like how did that play a role?
I think there's been a level of grief and grieving in all of it. You know, you grieve the loss of a relationship that never existed. You grieve the loss of your innocence, of your, you know, naivete, whatever. And then, of course, you grieve the loss of the person that you thought that you knew. And then you grieve the loss of, you know, the extra people, or even, you know, in my case, like there's some that I haven't completely cut out, but the relationship will never be the same, because as long as they're going to have him in their life in any way, I cannot be there in the way that I once was. I can't. So, I mean, there's a huge amount of grief anytime you lose a chunk of your life, or you have to close the door on a part of it. I think there's grieving, but just like with any other loss, like there's stages to the grief.
Does his family, like, are people aware of? I have to assume people are aware.
No.
Like,
well, the people who know him deeply, like you said, his past friends or
who the hell are these people, and do they know that he's doing this?
I doubt his family does.
I guess I'm just confused as like who is allowing this to continue on, other than himself, obviously. But like, does he have people around him that are like, you need to get help? Like, this is a problem.
No. So a narcissist doesn't really have anyone around them that's close. So he is practically estranged from his family. I am closer to his family than he is. What a narcissist has is what's called flying monkeys. So a flying monkey is someone that just says, oh yeah, you're great no matter what. So because he is charismatic and he is successful and he is wealthy and he is fit and healthy and, you know, whatever word you want to use. So a narcissist, like that sort of immediate thought that we all have, that they're confident and they're arrogant or whatever, which he is all of those things, which, you know, doesn't necessarily mean someone's a narcissist. But those are all traits that people find very captivating. And so they can sweep people into their vortex, but the thing is no one ever gets close to them except for that supply, which at one time was me. So I know him better than anyone does, which is why he literally, you know, he'll still message every now and again, you know, you're the love of my life, blah, 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 blah. But he actually like sort of intrinsically hates me because I'm the only person, you know, other than the previous supplies and probably the new supplies catching on now, that like actually sees the giant void that is like literally his soul. So
I am shook.
Yeah, this is crazy.
Do you? Okay, I know. I'm like last question, but I'm shook. The people that you're identifying as like new supply, I feel like I'm having a hard time accepting that term because y'all are like people.
Yes.
And so that's like a hard, like I'm
fix.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time like processing that as a term to describe like people he's victimizing. But is there a sense of like, was old supply saying like, Aymie, warning, and do they do that to new? Like, I don't want to say like you're doing that because I think that's probably not healthy. But is there like this longing to like warn the next person?
That's a great question.
A lot of people do want to warn. That's like one of the things that they'll talk about when you're going through like the recovery from narcissistic abuse. It will make no difference. Okay. They sweep you up into such a whirlwind that it would make no difference. Right. And that's what we're talking about when anybody that's in an abusive situation, like there's really nothing that anyone external can say. Like people will say to me all the time, if I had said, if I had done, if I had told you, my mom's like, if I had just forbid you, like none of those things would have made a difference.
Right.
So, for one, obviously I feel not the nicest way about this person who went with my boyfriend to Mexico. Like,
got it.
Not my favorite person. But yes, of course, there's part of me that wants to throw him under the bus for the messages that I still receive a year and a half later, like for sure. But will it do any good? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, it's like everybody just kind of has to go through their course and kind of discover it for themselves, because they will warn, right? Like I'm certain that the new supply, and the reason that they call it like new supply is because the narcissist really doesn't actually look at people as people.
Yeah,
they don't have the same kind of relation. Yeah.
And that's why it's hard for us to use that word, because we're like not narcissists and we're like, these are people.
And of course, like, I don't want to think of myself as being like supply, but at the end of the day, like, I'm
checking those boxes.
That's kind of, like, that's just what I was for him. And still am. If you give them anything, positive or negative, it's supply. So it's like,
so it's also the actions that you take. It's like you, and then also like what you give him, what action, like
anything.
If you responded to a text, that would be like some of his supply.
Yeah, anything. And it could be positive or negative. They really don't care. So if they can't get the positive out of you, if they can't get you to just be adoring of them, then they will just do stuff that makes you enraged at them, whatever works for them.
The controlling factor.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if they have control over your emotions in any way, shape, or form, that works for them.
I'm not gonna lie, this might be my favorite episode.
I know.
I feel like everybody's gonna be like, "Oh, that's a lot on the Google."
Yeah, because Asia hit me up. She was like, "I think I have a perfect guest. We're gonna talk about domestic violence." And I'm like when I saw that, I was like, "Oh yes, I definitely want to talk about that. I'm definitely down." Like I'm very against domestic violence, but like I said, growing up, I saw domestic violence as the physical, so that's what I just associated what this would be, but. I just learned so much from just you sharing your experience and knowing the signs and just learning more about other types of abuses. Like obviously I knew, but I've never really heard it in this much depth.
No, this is like one of the best episodes ever. Anything like end of the yoga session, like anything you didn't get to do or say or share or tell people or offer to people, please feel free to do that now before we wrap up. Any last sort of thoughts or words?
I mean, I know like we wanted sort of the theme to be like just touching on like the starting over.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for me it was a huge and very painful pill to swallow, that I went from, not wanting for anything to kind of like, it felt like steps backwards and whatnot. And I know it can be like, we mentioned the word shame, or it can be embarrassing a little bit to kind of feel like you're starting over. And I know that it's something that we've all heard 1,000 times, but like, you really are exactly where you're supposed to be, no matter what it is that you're starting over from. And, it's daunting and it's terrifying, but how beautiful is it that we do get a chance to start over, wherever, however, in whatever way, recovering from whatever. It's like, and I know for myself, and hopefully this can be helpful for anybody, is to just kind of change the narrative. And instead of I have to start over, it's I get to start over. Because, and say it is starting over from domestic violence. I was very lucky in that my domestic violence was not particularly physical, and that I worried for my mental health, but I didn't have to worry about my physical health that much. There are others that do. And so even more beautiful that people that are closing, the door on that chapter get to have the chance of starting over, because when domestic violence really escalates, there is a possibility of simply not getting to start over.
Wow.
So
that was a perfect way.
I am shook right now.
I want to thank you for being so transparent, so vulnerable, just sharing your experience, because I mean, that's tough to do. And I think a lot of people are going to hear this, and I think it's going to help people. So
me too.
Thank you.
And I want to, yeah.
I was going to say, like, I feel like we're in a space right now where things are shifting. And, like I said, this is the first time that I spoke about it. Because things are still intertwined a little bit, like I'm careful with what I share on social media. I'm careful with who I talk to about what. And, but I really do feel like there is a shift happening. And a huge part of that shift is us all, being able to kind of own the stuff and own the story. And so if anybody else can be encouraged to do the same, it's like, that is actually how you take your power back.
Oh my gosh. I'm like obsessed with you. Okay. Wow. Let us please drop anything you want to drop, socials, however people can find
plug
you.
Away.
Yeah, please plug that for us as well. We'll also put it in the show notes, everybody, so you can swipe up on the episode and just link right to Aymie's stuff, but please feel free to share.
I am Aymie Alexandra, AYMIE ALEXANDRA on Instagram. That's sort of my main platform, and my inbox is always open. It's actually been crazy being on this journey. The amount of people that I've somehow been connected to just by sheer, universal synchronicities. I have a lot of women particularly women that I've been connected to, but actually some men too as well, that have dealt with the same or similar situations. And yeah, my inbox is always open.
Wow. Well, we appreciate you so much again. Seriously, this has been so amazing and enlightening. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story really in full for the first time. I want to emphasize that. I would have never known that if you didn't tell me, just because of your presence and your grace and your strength. So shout out to you for that.
Strength. Definitely, I like that strength. Yeah.
You guys know what to do if you like this episode, which you obviously did, because wow. And this podcast, please feel free to leave us a review. It helps so much, and we love reading what you guys are saying, and yeah, tell a friend as well.
Yeah, make sure you all show Aymie some love. Like I said, like Asia said, this is her first time telling her story, and we just appreciate that you would do it somewhere like here. So thank you again. Make sure you all follow us on Insta, Done With Adulting Pod. Also on Twitter, Done WTH Adulting.
Thank you, Aymie. We love you.
Thank you so
You can
much.
come back
Thank you
any
for having me.
freaking time.
Thank you.